Welcome. I'm Eric Fleming, host of A Moment with Eric Fleming, the podcast of our time. I want to personally thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like what you're hearing, then I need you to do a few things. First, I need subscribers. I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/A Moment with Eric Fleming. Your subscription allows an independent podcaster like me the freedom to speak truth to power and to expand and improve the show. Second, leave a 5-star review for the podcast on the streaming service you listen to it. That will help the podcast tremendously. Third, go to the website, momenteric.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast, leave reviews and comments, listen to past episodes, and even learn a little bit about your host. Lastly, don't keep this a secret like it's your own personal guilty pleasure. Tell someone else about the podcast. Encourage others to listen to the podcast and share the podcast on your social media platforms because it is time to make this moment a movement. Thanks in advance for supporting the podcast of our time. I hope you enjoy this episode as well. Hello, and welcome to another Moment with Eric Fleming. I am your host, Eric Fleming. And hey, y'all, this is going to be a big show. Going to send y'all off into the holiday with a big show. So without any further ado, let's get this program started with a moment of news with Grace G.
Thanks, Eric. The U.S. Congress passed and President Biden signed a temporary spending bill to avoid a November 17th government shutdown. Moody's lowered its outlook on the U.S. credit rating to negative from stable due to large fiscal deficits and a decline in debt affordability, which was criticized by President Biden's administration. The U.S. Supreme Court announced its first formal code of conduct governing the ethical behavior of its 9 justices that drew mixed reviews due to the apparent lack of an enforcement mechanism. Suspicious letters were sent to election offices in California and are being investigated for potentially containing toxic substances. Similar incidents had occurred in Georgia, Oregon, and Washington. Democratic U.S. Senator Joe Manchin announced that he will not seek re-election, which could impact Democrats' ability to maintain their Senate majority in the 2024 election. U.S. Senator Tim Scott suspended his run for the 2024 Republican presidential election nomination after failing to make a significant impact in national opinion polls. Marilyn Mosby, Baltimore's former top prosecutor, was convicted on 2 federal perjury counts for falsely claiming financial duress to withdraw funds from a retirement plan. The FBI seized electronic devices from New York City Mayor Eric Adams as part of an investigation into his 2021 mayoral campaign's fundraising. U.S. Secret Service agents detailed to protect President Joe Biden's granddaughter fired shots after 3 people tried to break into an unmarked Secret Service vehicle. The trial related to former U.S. President Donald Trump's election interference case in Georgia is not expected to conclude until the winter of 2024 or early 2025, according to Fulton County DA Fannie Willis. And the U.S. Army has reversed the court-martial convictions of 110 African-American soldiers from a century ago, including 19 who were executed, acknowledging past official racism. I am Grace G., and this has been a Moment of News.
All right. Thanks, Grace. Appreciate that. And now we're going to kick this big show off with Charles DeBow. Mr. Charles H. DeBow III is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Black Chamber of Commerce. Over the past 20 years, he has gained extensive experience working in every department of the NBCC. Joining the team in November of 1999 as the liaison to the NBCC Global Federation of Chambers in North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, Europe, and Africa. This began the NBCC's evolution as a global advocate on behalf of black businesses. The National Black Chamber of Commerce is dedicated to economically empowering, sustaining African American communities through entrepreneurship, capitalistic activity within the United States, and via interaction with the black diaspora. Mr. DeBow has focused work on the unconventional challenges confronting African American small businesses, advocacy, and opportunities, along with the operational challenges of nonprofit organizations. Charles H. DeBow III is the older brother of the NBCC co-founder K. DeBow Alford and brother-in-law and co-founder Harry C. Alford. Charles H. DeBow is a name in military history as the grandson of Charles DeBow, a Buffalo soldier, and the son of Charles H. DeBow Jr., a graduate of the first training class of 1942 from the Tuskegee Army Airfield, certifying him as an original Tuskegee Airman. Mr. DeBow is a graduate of Indiana University's Kelley School of Business. He has spent over 13 years in various capacities with CBS Records and 10 years as a marketing consultant developing marketing campaigns for clients such as Michael Jackson, Prince, Janet Jackson, Sade, Earth, Wind and Fire, Pink Floyd, Bruce Springsteen, Luther Vandross, Teddy Pendergrass, and others. The music industry experience provided a foundation for a legacy based on consumer marketing. In 2023, the National Black Chamber of Commerce will celebrate its 30th year of service to black communities. The passing of our founders finds us in deep retrospection of who we are, what kind of organization we have become, and who are the people we serve, how we conduct business, and the incumbency of legacy. The entire leadership team of the NBCC commits to complete dedication to maintaining the impeccable standards we inherited. Today, the NBCC is redirecting their core values to developing solutions, supporting commerce in post-COVID economic crisis for black communities. They say they strive for entrepreneurial diversity with contracting, infrastructure development, ITC, housing, energy, agribusiness, cannabis, manufacturing, and natural resources, with emphasis on socially responsible and inclusive practices globally. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to present as a guest on this program, Mr. Charles H. DeBow III. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Charles DeBow. I'm pronouncing that right, DeBow, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. He's the president of the National Black Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to A Moment with Eric Fleming, sir.
Thank you. What an honor and a pleasure to be here and to join your audience and your universe.
Yes, sir. Normally with my guests, I try to give them a quote first to kind of get it started, and then let you explain what you think of the quote, and then we'll get into the question. Sound good?
Yes, sir.
All right. Your quote is this: "Let me give you a word of the philosophy of reform. The whole history of the progress of human liberty shows that all concessions yet made to her august claims have been born of earnest struggle. The conflict has been exciting, agitating, all-absorbing, and for the time being, putting all other tumults to silence. It must do this or it does nothing. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, and it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will." Give me your thoughts on that quote.
That's a heavy one, and it is etched in stone in our world. And it is, we can go all around that, but the key thing that has resonated, because you went much further and deeper on where it comes from, but the key part of that is there will be no success without a struggle. And that's it. That is, I mean, you can't pick apart a place, a thing, an item in the universe right now where that isn't apparent, particularly right now. And particularly as we're talking about who you are, who I am, what we're doing here, why we're here, that is the whole reason why. I mean, it's no different than sports, evolution of human nature, our bodies, the climate, or anything of like that. So, I'll go on and on and on. But what really it is about, you're not going to get anything if you don't ask for it, if you don't seek it. We had a thing. I was in the entertainment industry, and we had to get radio stations to play records, and we would kind of tell them that you got to ask for what you want. If you are a business person, you got to ask for it. They in sales they teach you to ask for the order.
Yes.
One of the first things you teach a kid is, well, did you ask them to buy your product? It's almost like a paper route, or you see kids selling candy, or even, it's that season, the Salvation Army, and they're out there ringing the bell, or the Goodwill, or all these things. You could stand there and you could ring it, and people are going to walk right by you.
That's right.
That's society, that's life. So I want to focus my thoughts in reaction to you and or I'll say response to you and your audience. I want to make the optimal usage of this time. I mean, how'd you pick that quote? I mean, what's behind that? Where are we going with this?
Well, actually, the idea came from your website. It's like it's one of the quotes. It's one of the quotes that y'all put up.
On some of our own medicine. Yeah.
So I went a little deeper than the actual quote that's pictured on there. The full context of that part of the speech, because a lot of times, just that part where it says, "If there's no struggle, there is no progress." A lot of times, people don't get the full context. So I threw in, where that fit in the speech that Mr. Douglas gave. But yeah,
let's give some quote there, because some credit, because where you get this stuff? We don't offer it in schools anymore. You know what I mean? Where are you gonna get any of the true richness and value and assets of our culture, of our struggle, of our evolution as part of the human race? We got to do it for ourselves, because ain't nobody else going to allow. As a matter of fact, they're trying to erase it. Anything that gives you pride or some reason to feel that you're somebody, can we take that away? Or just like it never existed? Well, that's what we're here to say right now. It's a changing day. It's a changing time. We don't care what other people think, or rely upon them to educate my child, or my world, or my family, or my business partners, or my constituency. Anyway, I ain't got righteous up here. So
that's all right. That fits right in.
But the whole point was, that's from Frederick Douglass.
Yes, sir.
We don't know much about Frederick Douglass unless you go and look and get into it, or something crosses your pathway. I mean, these are guys that came way before us that did so much that, we got to look at ourselves right now and say, are we really living up to our potential? Am I here in this moment speaking to you with empathy, with an open heart, an open mind, and saying, I know I can't take this with me. And I don't gain nothing if I don't empower you. As a matter of fact, I lose an ally. I lose a link in my chain that could possibly be that much stronger.
Yes, sir. So speaking about that, what exactly is the mission of the National Black Chamber of Commerce?
We say it earnestly, and that is to economically empower through entrepreneurial pursuits throughout the diaspora. It is to impact Black communities by way of entrepreneurism. It's simplified, but oh whoa, does it mean so much?
Yes, sir. So how did the organization come about, and how has it evolved since it started?
We actually had our celebration of our 30th anniversary in Atlanta back in August as part of the National Alliance for Black Business National Business Conference. And it's come full circle. That conference we had was actually the 123rd convening. It was started, all this, everything we're talking about with Black commerce, Black thinkings, Black communities and linkages and Black Wall Street and all that, everything kind of comes together from the same genes, the same DNA. And that is Booker T. Washington. So the National Black Chamber of Commerce was really born out of my sister and her husband, Harry Alford and Kay DeBow Alford, out of Indianapolis, Indiana. As Kay and Harry were entrepreneurs, they were in the video business, and with back then it's called Blockbusters. They had a franchise, Blockbuster, and they saw how. No, I'm sorry. They had an independent franchise, and then Blockbuster came to town, and essentially just put it so it was they were at a competitive disadvantage. They were looking for something else to do. They got involved with politics and campaigning, and got involved with the campaign of then candidate Evan Bayh for the governor of Indiana. He won, and they offered him various types of opportunities and jobs. And they needed somebody to work in diversity procurement for the state of Indiana. Harry had a background in sales with Procter and Gamble, Johnson and Johnson. So really on the corporate side, he's very good in traditional type sales. And I mean, corporate, intense, scientific history. If you know anything about Procter and Gamble, that's who they are. That's what they do. They teach you the science of it. You almost get an MBA, but they're looking for MBAs to further educate. Anyway, in that job, which was to increase the diversity, or in this case, it was Black numbers of contractors, of suppliers with the state of Indiana. And let's say if they had a goal of 12%, they were probably actually doing something like 0.1 or even 0.05% of that. And so he got into it, and the governor was saying, yeah, come on, let's get these numbers up, and everything seemed positive. But then he figured out what some of the disconnect was on why. It wasn't always that it was a racism moniker or reef hanging on the front door, as much as there was a lack of education, of training, of preparedness, and kind of like networking or communication on somebody getting through the door and then telling everybody else like how I did it, or what were the best practices of it, or what was there any kind of scientific, statistical, analytical analysis of what happened. So speed that story up. Over about 2 years' time, he got very good at it. Very good, and it rocked the boat. And there was a good old boy network, and in particular, when you talk about in Indianapolis, Indiana, this had been going on for years and years and years and years. I mean, it's just how life was. And all of a sudden now these Negroes and got figured it out, and they got somebody on the inside who's getting the information, and the governor's kind of working with them. So the governors, let's say the backers, the big corporate people, they got started complaining because they were no longer getting 100% of the gain, and companies started coming. So then, there's always the adage about we can't find nobody. We can't find nobody to do it. If you've ever been to Indianapolis, you will probably have come in through the newer part of the United Terminal. The United Terminal was over a $500 million project that was using some federal funding and government funds, state, federal, all these levels. And they had given the contract to one particular company, a standard traditional company that was getting everything anyway. And the National Black Chamber of Commerce, well, actually, it was called the Hoosier Chamber of Commerce. It was a local chamber. So anyway, Harry, I left this part out. Harry got so good, he had to leave the job. They didn't fire him, he quit. Because they were saying, no, you're doing too much. You got to slow down. Or the state police were following him. His kids were going to school and coming home, and there were strange things happening. His phones were being bugged. There was all kinds of crazy stuff going on that could happen on a state level because, the majority, the white folks wasn't happy.
Gotcha.
And this thing goes on all levels. But in Indiana, they look like we ain't having no uppity Negroes down here. But Indianapolis particularly is full of them. That's where we all come from. That's where I'm from. So Harry had to leave the job. He was looking for something, and he started the Hoosier Minority Chamber of Commerce. And they had no premise or no handbook or no precedent. There were not black chambers in America, and there were chambers in black towns and countries and places in the world, but none that were specifically conceived to serve black business in this fashion. And that's where the Hoosier Chamber of Commerce was conceived and founded, and it grew. And one of the stories I was just telling you about Weircook Airport in Indianapolis, where they had the United Terminal need to be built. It was a $500 million project. They couldn't find any black contractors or businesses to do it. And they got together between the preachers, the political leaders, the black community, black business owners, and they protested to the mayor. And the mayor said, yeah, we'd love to give somebody more work than ever. We don't have anybody that's qualified. Harry went out and around the country and found the biggest black construction companies. Down there with you was Russell. Out of Ohio was Smoot Construction, and out of Gary, Indiana, Chicago area was Powers, Mayman Powers and Brothers. And I may be leaving one company out or so, but those are the big three of black construction that had the history, that had the experience, that had the capacity. And Smoot Construction, I believe, was a company that ended up coming in, getting it as a co-developer, and that's where some subcontracting developed, and the rest became history. That it was a major breakthrough in local advocacy for black business. Out of that, companies and entities and other people, other communities are coming and saying, hey, how do we do that in our town? How do we do this over here? And they start talking to some attorneys and other people and say, hey, man, you got to go national. And if you're going to be national, you got to move to D.C. And so they moved to D.C., founded, incorporated, began the National Black Chamber of Commerce, and it was done under the principles and teachings of Booker T. Washington. And what originally, over 100-something years ago, 25, I think 4 years ago, was the National Business League. The National Business League really was the principle. The National Business League and the concept for black chambers of commerce or black commerce is older than the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We were there. We were back there. You were talking about Frederick Douglass, but we're talking about Booker T. Washington now. These guys were brilliant and impeccable and dedicated, and knowing they had to hold themselves to the standards that were above and beyond anything else, because they were the first that they're going to become for. They were coming for them. So there's many stories. And so we're very connected to Tuskegee. And the other part that now, as we kind of piece together the story on the National Black Chamber of Commerce in Tuskegee, my father was one of the original Tuskegee Airmen. He's one of the first 5. And it is part of who we are as people, as a family, and what you cannot understand unless you can have some empathy for what those guys went through and what has our society gone through and whatever. So anyway, all that, put that all together in a thing, and here we are looking at what's the core, what's the key, what's the magic words that open the door. How do we get the genie out the bottle? Well, it's through commerce. It's through economic empowerment. It's through having your own money and not dependent on anybody. So that was the beginnings of the NBCC. We started off with a heavy focus on government contracting, as could be related, because that's where a majority of the wealth of our country was coming from. And there is in DC, there's a highway kind of similar, like almost in every major city, that goes around the city. And in DC, there's Maryland, Virginia, and DC itself. So they call it the DMV. And 80% of the government contracting activity was for businesses that are located within that beltway. And all the world, 80% of that action. So that's billions of dollars that was going on. And something like 90% of the black business that was doing anything was with the government was within that. And the numbers were small. So again, the same kind of story comes along where the guidelines are one level. Now, I just throwing out a number out there like 12%, but they vary from agency to agency. Mm-hmm. And when you look at it, and see, that's the other thing, it's hard to get the numbers. What are they really doing? What's the report card? And you'll often find that if the guide was 12%, it's fantastic if you could find somebody doing 5%. Most of them were below a point. They were there were even some at 0.05, and they're really bad. So anyway, that was the beginning. We focused on government contracting. There's some of the more sophisticated businesses. $1 million a year. In many cases, they were doing 20, 30, 40 million. That was how we really got started. And that kind of evolved both up that economic totem pole, where we started doing business or having communication and dialogue and interaction with the Fortune 500, with other government agencies, and with the Fortune 5000, which is a little bit different angle. Mm-hmm. And after we started saying, because let's say in the 2000 and shortly thereafter, there became the dot-com boom. And the dot-com boom was like, oh, the internet, and we're all on it, and we got computers. And we even testified on a Senate small business hearing about the digital divide and whether or not. So we found out we weren't stupid. We weren't without technology, but there was no application for it. My kids come home from school and go online. They use a computer. We might have a website, we might not have a website, but there's no customers for us. Then after that came the actual opening of the platform for iPhones, and all these applications evolved, and all this kind of creativity happened, and it allowed the masses in to coming up with how we might use business or how we might do business online. So while we're doing that, that allowed that same economic totem pole I'm talking about to go down, meaning that you sitting right here, look at you right now, you're a businessman. You might be at home. You got your own thing going right there, and you can control your own revenues. You don't have to, people can come to you and buy direct. So that's what the internet allowed us to do. And it was an explosion for entrepreneurial development, but even more so, your reach went global, direct. And so we're all the way now. And one of the big things that came with that was that we used to think we were for the business owner. One of the challenges business owners have is employees, or in this case, independent contractors. So we started to embrace small office, home office buildings, sole proprietorships. You don't even have to have a business to be connected with us. And you may be thinking, I don't know what I want to do. I just want to see what's going on. I want to know. Everybody's welcome. And so we also help, or a lot in the past, I'd say post-pandemic, a lot of things are relating to workforce development, which has to do with the challenges of, this conversation you hear about, there's all these jobs, but then there's all these unemployed people, and there's people that want to work but can't find a job. So there's some disjointedness in the space. And so we're also helping the companies as well as individuals match up with. Sometimes a job isn't a job. It's a business opportunity.
Yes, sir. All right. So
that was a long answer.
That's okay. We're kind of pushing it, but I want to get a couple of questions in for sure about a couple of projects you're doing, and then kind of get back into more of the discussion that you were tapping into in that answer. Talk to us about your partnership with the Dream Exchange, and talk about the Black Business Enterprise Certification Program.
All right, we're going to go. Let's start with the Black business. So essentially, you're doing some good. That's cutting edge stuff right there. It's really not out there for the public yet. We ain't even really, we in the lab about to have this big unveiling.
All right.
The background, the backdrop on, and let me set up the premise. The premise to this is, if you do anything in business, you may have heard about, well, I'm a certified business. I'm certified as I'm in a hub zone. I'm in a disadvantaged economic geographical location. Or I'm a woman-owned business. That's a WBE, Women Business Enterprise. Or I'm a minority, an MBE, a minority business enterprise. Or I'm a veteran. Or I'm a Native American. Or I'm this, or I'm that, and all these things, except what? There ain't no Black business certification, because we have been dumped and lumped and put in as minorities. Well, in 1964, when the Civil Rights Act was, minorities were Black. And then we got a little bit of Hispanic, and we started getting in there, but it was all about the post-Civil War free labor environment that slavery impacted, so that where the disparity that came about as a result of that, eventually through World War II, came back, and they put the 1964 Civil Rights Act there. And it was allowing for Black businesses to start these set-aside programs, quotas, all this stuff that was going on in society. That was the origination of it. And as soon as the Black folks started seeing success and the economy of America started to rise, and then there was kind of like a modern day post-World War II industrial revolution. People were buying homes. The value of our economy, everything was going up. And so as that happened, society goes, oh, okay. White women are minorities too. And they started diluting, homogenizing, if you could even think of it like that, what a minority is and how it comes about. And that's where, we're sitting here and you talk to a Black business owner, especially if you're doing anything that has anything to do with some kind of quotas or set-asides or, what, just to get in the game to compete. So we've come up, and here's the other part of it. There's no statistics. There's no science. You can't track it. There's no data. And so we can go on and on. I know time is short. This whole George Floyd thing and the whole DEI thing and the whole striking down of affirmative action and the parade of DEI executives that just got there after the pandemic and George Floyd now are resigning and going out because the word minority might even be illegal, depending on what the Supreme Court does today or tomorrow. Well, we ain't minorities. We're black business. And we're going to certify who we are, what we are, the credibility of who we are with a black business enterprise certification. And it is part of the offerings of the National Alliance for Black Business, which was co-founded between the National Business League and the National Black Chamber of Commerce, along with the World Conference of Mayors. And we also have the Historical Black Towns and Settlements. That's the beginning up here, but it is a revitalization of what Booker T. Washington started that will include the National Medical Association, the National Bar Association, the accountants, the nurses, the whole book worth of all black type organizations. These are the ones. That's why, if you notice, all the black ones were national this, national that. Well, this was done hundreds of years ago when they decided that we all needed to work together, we need to communicate, and out of that comes Black Wall Street. That's what that was. It was, and if you talk about it, there is the cycling, we talk about this black dollar and, how many times does this cycle in the Asian community? How many times in the Jewish community or any of the Indians or any of these things? Well, Black Wall Street, it was cycling 36 times. It almost never left the black community in that business model, in that best practice, in that program there. It just happened. There was some intellectual capacity behind it, but once it got going they couldn't have that. We had to stop it. So anyway, the Black Business Enterprise certification is something we're going to be launching early next year. You start hearing about it in January. It's really intended for us to be able to do business with each other. That's what it is cycling about. And it's not that complex, except it's going to have various tiers. So you can be certified to just on who you are and that you're really black and I really own this business. But you could also be certified in the fact that I do have some training in business. I do have work history, or I have taken this training on capital access that a bank will know. I know how to apply for your financial resources. Or we have a whole program that will involve technical assistance, accreditation, certification, and access to market. It's global. We're doing business, man. We're doing business all over the world. I just got back from Senegal last week. Because they asked us to come, but they came to Atlanta and met us and said, how do we do? What do we do? We got people just like you, except we need to learn how to build a business. So all this stuff we talked about, they're in the same boat. They're coming up the same way. That's what I'm saying. It's throughout the diaspora. We're in Colombia. We're in 11 countries in South America. If you follow the trans-African trade routes, we're all over. Man, do you even know that we have a group that came to us from India? I'm talking about Mumbai, New Delhi, India, and said, hey, we want to work with you guys because we're the black people of India. We're like, what? Yeah, our skin's darker and we get treated worse, but it's damn near 1 billion of us. It's a bunch of us. And we're like, okay, we're cool. Damn, what? And they say, yeah, well, we got 25 million small businesses and we need to figure out how we can work with each other and do business. That's one thing. You got something similar going on almost every place you go on this planet. So that is the core of the BBE, the Black Business Enterprise Certification. We're going to introduce our own certification that we're going to track the data. And here's the other thing about this whole thing about diversity, equity, inclusion. What's the business case? Are we doing it because we're trying to be nice or because the government told us to do it? And our whole position is, no, you're doing it because it makes money.
Right.
And when you don't have any love, here's the other part to it. That knife cuts both ways. If you're not supporting us, then why should we buy your product? Why, we got what, 3.2, $3.6 trillion of consumer impact on the money we spend. Oh, you're in trouble if black folks decide, nah, we ain't having that no more. You're in big trouble, and they will respond immediately. So that's that's why we'll have to have another show to go in some of the deeper. The other thing you asked about was a Dream Exchange.
Yes, sir.
The Dream Exchange is the launch of the first black stock exchange, the first black NASDAQ listed stock exchange. And it really is a opportunity to create wealth, to create capital, access to capital for black businesses. And if you know anything about penny stocks or whatever and how raising money, it's in a simplified sense, it's sophisticated, legal, institutional crowdfunding. You can buy into a company, but let's say this podcast, you decide, well, I'd like to become a broadcast network. I'd like to be involved with this or that. I only need $1 million to really do what I'm trying to do. And all people like me or people, other guests or your audience say, you know what, I'd like to be a part of that. I'm going to put up $100. I'll put up $1,000. I'll put up $10,000. But what do I get for my money? I want equity. I want stock. I'm buying in. Mm-hmm. But then I turn to my audience, whether it's 1 million or 10 million or the world or 10 people, and say, hey, y'all, let's tune into this thing. And then if you bring in somebody, a black product of a company. I was trying to think of one right there, right off the hand, and I was thinking of one of your restaurants down there because you got so many. That's where my mind went on.
Let's go with Slutty Vegan. Let's do that. She's doing well.
Yeah. Okay, Slutty Vegan is very known. So we're going to say, oh man, and that's even more because you see now we're trying to be healthy. We're trying to be, and so Slutty Vegan. This is a dream right quick. We're using golden pineapples from Ghana that are shipped in fresh, flown in, got off the plane, and then we're using petite cola nuts from Senegal. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff out here we don't even know about. Soursop, that's the one I was trying to think of. Soursop. It lowers your blood pressure. It does that. Slutty Vegan's using all this stuff, and they didn't just get it anywhere. They're buying from this particular farmer who's on this organic thing, and we know the whole thing from the dirt all the way to where it's coming to you on your plate. That's the business we're supporting. So you go there and you do that, and all of a sudden Slutty Vegan's saying, wow, wait a minute, this is a line. You got to take reservations, and we can only, and you got to wait till next month to get in. That's how those things in New York go or whatever, but we're organized, we're communicating, we're sharing that. Well, Slutty Vegan said, we got to be a franchise, or we're going to come up with frozen products or something that you can buy in your store, or we'll ship it to your home. That's when you're saying, okay, they're going public and we want to be on it. That's when you would say the Dream Exchange would come along and say, we'll get you on, we'll give you all the regulatory issues and the legal and the thing you need, and you'll be on the New York Stock Exchange. That's the goal. It looks very good. There is the Main Street Act that's coming up that has a direct impact on that. Well, we talk about politics and things of that nature, but you can look up the I think it's called the Main Street Act that is really focused on the Dream Exchange. The Dream Exchange is a group out of Chicago, and Joseph Sakala is the CEO, and he has a background with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. If you go to their website, look it up. There's a brother there named Dwayne Niles. My mind's gone all over the place. That is a Georgetown graduate, but he's like talking to somebody you know. And they've got this vision. They've been working on it for a while. We're honored and pleased to be associated with them. We're looking forward to the launch of that. That's coming up.
All right. Now, I got to ask you this one last question, and we'll wrap it up. What role can public policy play in helping Black business? And in couching this question, what is the biggest challenge that Black businesses have, and how can public policy fix that? We got a few minutes. Not a whole lot.
Okay. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. So here's the issue. Here's the first issue.
Okay.
What's wrong with it? Well, what's wrong with it is all these scientists, all these gurus. We just talked about 1964. We talk about all this evolution and everything that's happened. We talk about project labor agreements, all these other things that are going on that were put in place to help inclusivity, balance in the economy that aren't being enforced. And our government, and I mean that not by the people that are there now, I'm talking about the system, the culture, how things operate. It's kind of like, well, we recognize this law today, but that one over there, we're not enforcing. It's kind of like the speed limit or something. Sign says 55, but they're out there blowing by you at 80. And it's just common, depending on where you live in America or whatever. And, so what is it? But today, you get a ticket. And there's 1,000 and everybody doing another way. They pick and it's selective governing or management. So what can we do about it? First of all, we don't let it stop us. We keep going.
Okay.
One of the things we're doing about that is we're doing business with each other. And self-economic empowerment. Or I love to use somebody everybody relates to, Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry is where he is right now because he didn't let that stop him. Do you know, you can go back and check how many millions and billions of dollars did Steven Spielberg, did he make before he won his first Oscar? That's how, and he's part of the club.
Right.
Tyler did it totally as an entrepreneur. Totally as I had to find it. Nobody care about all that. We know what Medea didn't care, but he made it and found his niche. It's no different than when Fox first launched on TV, they were a Black network. That Black network got them the NFL. It's no different in the music business or any other thing you look at. When you realize what you have and what you got, you can build upon it and it'll take you somewhere. So as we become economically empowered, the government got to change. And at the very least, be fair. And watch out now. Watch out, y'all. The minority majority is here. And they scared. And they're trying to close the ranks. And they're trying to say, no, everybody don't need to come in here. And we might need to be a world centralized organization. But anyway, I'm going off on too many tangents. And I know I wasn't geared up mentally for 30 minutes. Be careful what you ask.
Yes, sir.
Because these Negroes don't get a chance to speak on it.
Well, look. You're right. We're going to have to get you back on to talk about some things, but you touched on some points that I think are very, very important to the listeners. And I think my audience is intelligent enough to decipher and figure out how that will impact them politically. But if people want more information and they have the time to read and listen to what you have to say, how can people get in touch with the Black Chamber of Commerce?
Very, very, very simple and easy. Directly, we're at nationalbcc.org. you go there and you start plugging into our world. You can email me directly at info@nationalbcc.org. That's info at nationalbcc, like Bravo Charlie Charlie, Black Chamber of Commerce.org. And if you're, depending on where you are, you might find a local Black chamber or not. And some of them are affiliated with us, some of them are not, but everybody, all roads lead to the same destiny. And that's where we're trying to economically empower through entrepreneurism. So don't be afraid to speak your mind. Don't be afraid to ask for what you want. And don't be afraid to do business with your brothers and sisters as just somebody that you like. Don't have to necessarily be Black. But I want to thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And we'll do everything we can to support you and give you much more of a presence in our mission. We'll be back in Atlanta this August, but we're always in and out through the area there, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you so much.
All right, Mr. President, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right, and so we are back. So, Brother DeBow, did y'all feel that passion that he had? It's good to have guests, and we really ran out of time because of, and I stretched it as far as I could because I wanted to get in, some points and highlight some things that the National Black Chamber of Commerce is doing, and I really want y'all to look that up, especially as a Black business. Because that was one of the things we talked about when I was involved in politics in Jackson, Mississippi, and a lot of shows that used to come on, Brother Stanley, Kim Wade. It didn't matter about the political differences. They all were unified in supporting Black businesses. And they would use their formats, and that was really, really an important thing. And it's something that is very important, for us. And when you hear Brother DeBow talk about the history of Black Wall Street and the National Business League and all those things, that's the history that's our history. And it's been in our nature. And the fact that he mentioned about $3.7 trillion of purchasing power, he was talking about Black people in the United States. That's the purchasing power we have. Not the nation, just Black folks, right? 12% of the population can generate $3.7 trillion worth of purchasing power. So when people say, well, Black folks ain't got no power, ain't got no say-so, you do. And that's why they don't want you boycotting stuff, right? So I'm glad he threw that out there. But yeah, if you're a Black business, pay attention to the National Black Chamber of Commerce and what they're doing. And hopefully we'll come back and talk some more about some more things that they're working on. And of course, I wanted to highlight the fact, and I did it off the air, but I'll tell y'all, he and my mom went to the same high school, not at the same time, but they're both alums of Shortridge High School in Indianapolis, Indiana. So I wanted to give a shout out to Shortridge. My mom was part of the first integrated class at that high school, and her brother, my uncle, was the first Black quarterback there. So, there's connections all the way around. Anyway, I just wanted to highlight that part of the interview as far as understanding that supporting Black business is important for our politics. That's the only reason why we are supposed to be really in politics, is to build up Black economics. But you've heard me give that sermon before. Now I'm going to have another special guest on. And, you know, I caught this brother on the news and I was just like, why is he not getting a lot more of attention? Why is he not? So I reached out and he agreed to come on the podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have the distinction of having Moses West as my next guest. Moses is a retired Army officer. He is currently the CEO and founder of AWG Contracting and his nonprofit 501c3, the Moses West Foundation. He works closely with the U.S. military, universities, and municipalities to mitigate the prolonged effects of drought, water contamination issues, and food shortages by advancing the technology of atmospheric water generators. He has worked endlessly over the past 10 years to manufacture the most energy efficient, high volume water producing atmospheric water generator units available for military use, disaster recovery, and normal everyday uses for a myriad of other solutions where water has become difficult to obtain. He has proven that the atmosphere is an endless and inexhaustible source of pure water that is limitless in its ability to provide for a growing global population. This is a necessary source of water for many critical areas of society today and well into the future. He has developed mass production water facilities as well as small units for emergency use. He has made it his mission to prove that the atmosphere is a limitless source of water that will help provide for society well into the future. He has been the first to successfully use the largest AWG unit for in any major water crisis event. Moses deployed the technology in Puerto Rico on the island of Vieques to supply all of the island with potable water. He has deployed one AWG unit in Flint, Michigan and Jackson, Mississippi. These missions are recorded as the first time that any large atmospheric water generator has been deployed in recovery efforts from a natural disaster or water contamination issues within the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have a guest on this podcast, Mr. Moses West. All right, Moses West. How you doing, brother? You doing good?
I'm doing great. Yourself?
I'm doing lovely. I'm really honored to have you on. You have been a story that I've been following for a while, and then you did something that really hit home for me, and we'll get into that into the interview. But normally what I try to do with a guest is that I have a quote. And it's either something that they said or something that's related to the work that they're doing. And then I want the guest to respond to that quote. So here's your quote. Water is the foundation of life, and we're walking around in it every day. Break that quote down for us.
Well, water comes in three forms. Scientifically, it's just liquid and solid and a gas. And it gets to every place on the earth in the gaseous state. It's a highway of water that we walk around in every day. Every hurricane that hits the coastline, that water came through the air. Every thunderstorm that wipes out a town, that water was in the air. That's how much water's in the air. Every flood that happens. And if you're biblical, you go back in time to the time of Noah when there was a flood, and all that water was in the air. And as it poured down for 40 days and 40 nights, it's pouring down out of the air.
All right. So in the simplest terms, break down the technology behind your atmospheric water generator.
Very simple. You have a surface area. You control the temperature of the surface area, the airflow over the surface area, how the air flows through it, and you can drain off every ounce of moisture that's in the air that you pass through the machine. It's simple. It's just controlling the airflow and having a surface that's designed specifically that air can pass over it at the right temperature, the right time, taking in consideration the temperature outside, the OHE, outside air temperature, the humidity in the air, pressure, altitude. You program the machine to speed up, slow down, get the CFM to increase, decrease. It's after a while, after you do it long enough and you have a basics of science engineering, it's child's play. It really is child's play. We have people programming every day. And that programming is more difficult than the programming that I put into the PLCs on my machines, or I've just gotten used to it.
I understand. And you'll probably have to do a remedial course with me, but that you make it sound simple. So let me ask you this: how did you go from being an Army Ranger, jumping out of airplanes, to being this incredible engineer turning air into water?
Well, I left when I got out of the military, I was injured, and I left the military, and then I left the United States. I worked as an engineer for a while here in the United States, and then I lived in Europe for a number of years, and then I came back from Europe in, I think, 1998, and then in 2001, I went to Australia, and I lived in Australia. So, I got to retire at an early age, and I felt like I had more to offer and more to do. I spent a lot of energy, being a good soldier, and I decided to take some of that energy that I was really good at to destroy things, excuse me, and decided to try to add something to saving people's lives as we move into runaway climate instability. So that's how I did it.
So
I just had to take some time.
So you had an engineering background through the military or in college after the military?
All through my life, I've always been a tinkerer, took things apart, learned things, studied physics and on my own after college, just for something to do. It was fun. So I went and I used to stay hooked up with kinematic equations and just calculate whatever I could. The speed of a car, weight, how fast it was going down the road, how much energy it was using, friction. And then I took a course in my spare time on AutoCAD and computer-aided design and drafting, SolidWorks. And I was just doing that for fun. And then I saw this machine, and in the military also, I was a test pilot. So I had 18 CH-47s, and at one time I was a brigade aviation maintenance officer. I had hundreds of aircraft and thousands of trucks, and I was responsible for all that maintenance.
Yes, sir. You sound like my cousin. I've got a cousin who basically was like that, and he'll just understate, his intelligence, but it's like he went to like the University of Chicago Lab School. His dad worked for Argonne Laboratories, and he's, making brakes for sports cars. You know what I'm saying? He worked on airplanes, all that stuff. And, it's just, he just kind of said it the same way. Yeah, I like tinkering with things and all that. But that's an incredible talent to have. And I appreciate that you decided to use that for the common good. Now, Garrett Morgan is known primarily for perfecting the traffic light, but he was also the inventor of the gas mask as well. His call to action with the gas mask came with the Cleveland Waterworks explosion. So was the Flint, Michigan water crisis your call to action for the AWG? What was the first time you had to use it?
The military was using them.
Okay.
When I came back from Australia, I was living in Hawaii, and I saw a machine, and the only way that I could get it built, especially I would say as a black man in the United States trying to advance some type of technology, it's really difficult. So the fairest place that I could go was I pitched my idea to the United States military of what I wanted to do with the technology. And of course, the military, they're going to give me an opportunity just as they would any other human being. And sometimes in society, we don't get that. And so that's why I still sell equipment to the military. And I'm actually pulling away from selling machines to the civilian community because of these types of things that we run into. And I don't run into those things with the military or working with soldiers or officers or commanders in the military or the Department of Defense. I don't run into that. But in the civilian community, I do.
Yeah, but
So I started out with the military.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is the first time I had heard of you was when the situation happened in Flint, and you showed up.
Okay.
So was that the first like crisis you had to deal with, or okay, go ahead. That's what I was trying to get to. What was the first crisis?
The first crisis I had to deal with, I was doing all my testing at a military base in Austin called Camp Mabry. And that's where we had the machines operating every day, throwing away 5,000 gallons of water every day. And Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, and a television station called KVUE, they did a news piece on the technology, and people saw me on TV. And so I was walking around, Hurricane Maria hit, and people tried to give me money, and I couldn't take their money. I was completely working with the military. I didn't have a foundation at that time, but Andrew Sauter from KVUE came over on the base. He got to interview me as I was working for the military. And someone said, hey, we really need one of these big machines that you made for the military in Puerto Rico after this hurricane. So what I did was I packed one of those machines up off the base. My attorneys made a foundation. That foundation at the time was called the Water Rescue Foundation. And the law firm made it. We raised enough money. I took a machine off the base, and I took it to Puerto Rico, and we supplied on the island of Vieques, we supplied around 15,000 people with drinking water. And I met a resident from Flint there, and the Flint crisis was going on too. So I had these big machines. And so after working in Puerto Rico, I came back to the States. I took a machine to this concert called Bonnaroo. I was invited there, supplied water at a concert in Kentucky, I think that place is, or Kentucky or Tennessee, where Bonnaroo is. Did that, went back to Texas, rehabbed another machine from the military, and took that to Flint, Michigan. So I did back-to-back missions with those big machines.
Okay. Now, according to your website, there's about 2.2 billion people who don't have access to safe drinking water. Why do you think that is, and what can public policy do to fix that?
Well, there's a variety of reasons why that people don't have access to safe, clean drinking water. One, and people don't want to hear this, but I really don't care. Climate change. Climate change is here. It's real. The ocean levels are rising. Then the human being that we live on top of the land, we contaminate everything. There's contaminants in all of our drinking water. There's contaminants in everything in your house. The more houses we build, the more contaminants go on the ground. They go into the aquifer. The more water we pull out of the aquifer to raise crops that don't actually feed people, but are cash crops to either put ethanol in cars, and then we have genetically modified foods. You're contaminating the environment. You're heating up the environment. You're using water and you're wasting water constantly. You're putting things into the ocean that are, contaminate the ocean. You're fracking. You're doing all this stuff on a planet that is running out of space to throw your trash away. And so it's probably more. I think two-thirds of the population by the year 2025 are going to have a hard time accessing clean water. Two-thirds of the population of the entire planet.
So
that's a lot.
So when getting back to the technology, so you mentioned like the we're contaminating, as well as excessively using. So your technology kind of filters out some of the contaminants so that the water is safe to drink that comes from the air.
Mother Nature is this wonderful. She's this wonderful thing that manages our entire planet. You can do all the dirt that you want to do, but when she works on something such as water, the sun evaporates the water. When the H2O molecule raises up out of contaminants in the ground, you can mix oil and water and all kinds of chemicals together. But as soon as that water evaporates out of that muck, that H2O molecule is pure. It leaves behind every trace of any chemical that was in the water. And so now you can recapture that water, leave the contaminants behind, then filter the water again you filter the air before it goes into the machine. You go over coils that are National Sanitation Foundation 61 rated and through the highest level of the federal government. Then you go through carbon filtration, then you get a glass of water, and there's nothing in that glass of water except H2O. There's no chemicals, there's no benzenes, there's no dioxins, there's no forever chemicals, forever plastics. There's nothing. Because you breathe it. You breathe the air every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You could go outside and take a shower in a rainstorm. It was the same thing that's happening in a rainstorm. It's the same thing that happens inside of these big machines that I make. I'm just creating a thunderstorm inside of a machine, the same way that nature creates a thunderstorm at 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 feet in the air.
Now that's a simple way to explain.
Same thing.
That's a simple way to explain it. A thunderstorm. Okay, because you were saying all these acronyms and all that. Okay, a thunderstorm in the machine. Now my little feeble brain can understand that. Okay, great. That's beautiful. So, is there anything other than governments being more proactive toward climate change that would help that situation? Or do you think? Go ahead.
No, you go on. Finish, please.
No,
elaborate more.
Yeah. So what I was saying is that all these nations supposedly have signed these accords and saying, well, yeah, we're going to be better stewards of the planet. Then, of course, two of the biggest consumers pull out of it. I think the United States and China. So everybody else is just trying to do their part, and by the definition of accords, we're not. Do you think that we need to be more conscious about how we do things, what we consume, how we, and should there be laws to regulate that, or should it be something that we as individuals be more conscious of and be more proactive in?
Well, absolutely. I think that everyone needs to participate in this massive destruction of the planet to reverse it, participate in correcting the situation. But right now, I envision people in the future suing governmental agencies and large government organizations and corporations for the damage that they do to the planet. A corporation has one charter, and that is to make money for the corporation, who is actually a person, has more rights and legal protections as a corporation because it is identified as a person, and it has a duty to the shareholder. Now, a corporation does not want to kill you, but they don't care if you die. And so what they do is they make profit. Even if they cut down the last tree, they make profit. Even if they contaminate the last drop of water, as long as they're getting a profit. And then even after that's contaminated, they'll figure a way to get some profit from that contamination. That's their charter.
Yes, sir.
And so us as people, I'm not hopeful. I am not hopeful because the greed is so rampant, and from what I see. So what I've done is I watch absolutely no news because it's absolutely useless. It's every last bit of it is propaganda. It's directing a message that is very untrue in many cases. I don't spend a lot of time on social media, but I do spend a lot of times talking with my neighbors and people that live in the city and engineers because we're all focusing on what we can actually affect. But so far as trying to correct what we've done to the planet, I'm not very hopeful.
I got you. Tell us the story of how you ended up in Jackson, Mississippi. How did you get involved with dealing with that water crisis there?
Oh, Cammy Kitchens, someone he he got through to me, and because I don't answer many calls or anything, so he got through to me and we started talking, and I said I'll come out there and I'll see what I can do. So I came out there, introduced the technology to him, got to meet Mr. Bobby Rush, the famous musician, and Bobby and I are still in contact. And yeah, and I tried to raise some money for the to put a machine in there, but it's difficult to raise money when the vast majority of the people who do think about this technology, we're all at this level. We people are just stretched thin, so donations are thin to help to help to go do something for someone. You need more corporate donations and that nature.
Well, if you're good with Bobby, you need to get Bobby to do one of them shows for you. Get them girls out there; they'll get you some money. They'll get you some money. I know Bobby.
Yeah.
I know Bobby real well. He's been a real fighter for the community as well as being an entertainer.
Yes.
And so, yeah,
Yes.
I got to meet him through the SCLC when we started the chapter again there. Him and his wife were founding members, and
Okay.
Cammy and I went to Jackson State together. So that's why I wanted to
Wow.
make sure that the Jackson story was told, because I wanted to give Cammy his flowers for reaching out to you
I
and
didn't.
getting you to come.
Oh, I didn't know you knew Cammy.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I know a few people.
Okay.
I know a few people. Now I know
Okay.
you, so now my circle's really big, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we should get Carlos Santana to come play with Bobby.
Oh my God,
He's
that'll be incredible. That'll raise you all the money you want. I would
yeah
think.
yeah yeah Carlos. He's a good supporter of the technology. We talk every
Cool.
now and then.
That's cool. Him, Rob Thomas, all them guys. That'll be sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
idea. So that brings up to another point. When you leave, do the generators stay or do they have to travel with you?
Well, I took the one from there because I had to bring that one back. I didn't have enough in donations to keep it there and keep it going. But I have a system right now that would fix all of their problems. And just to do that system, I'm looking anywhere from 65 to 100,000, 60 to $100,000. And that's a permanent fix for a water situation right now. Permanent fix.
And that
Permanent fix.
is that something that they could set up at the water treatment plant over
At,
there?
right there. No, no, not at the water treatment plant. That system would take care of Cammy Kitchen's entire assisted care living facility
Okay.
and then some. If Jackson ever had a problem and people needed drinking water in that entire neighborhood, they could come in Cammy Kitchen's place and get all the water they needed. Because that big machine on a good hot humid day, it does over 2,000 gallons of water a day. And then just on average every day, it does 1,250.
So the machine that you had in Jackson, how much would it have cost for that machine to stay? Because the way you make it sound is that machine is set up where people in need can come get it, but it's not something that will run the entire city. But
No,
if a disaster happened, like the water crisis that happened there, people would have a supply of water they can get 24 hours a day if need be.
absolutely. Just picture it as a big machine pulling water out of the air every day. So the machine itself is a small water plant. It's a small mobile water plant, self-contained. It's got its own generator. It stores 2,000 liters of water on board. And when the 2,000 liter tank on board fills up, the machine will cut off. But if you take that 2,000 liters out every time it fills up, before you know it, you've got 10,000 gallons of water stored up.
Gotcha.
And then you just keep filling these water tanks up. The machine is basically a tap to the atmosphere. It's the same way you go out in the back of your house, you turn your tap on and you let it run. The same way I can sit my water machine in the back of your house, turn it on, and it's just pulling the water out of the air. Where you're pulling water out of Lake Michigan, I'm pulling it out of the air. It's the same thing, except I'm just using technology to pull it out of another source. The same way as if you were in the Arctic, you would take a big chunk of ice and put it in a pot and melt it. You're producing water each way. One way you're doing it with a liquid, one way you're producing it by melting a solid, and the other way you're producing it is by condensing a gas. It's really simple, A, B, and C. It's all doing the same thing.
Okay. And so how much would you have needed to raise to keep the machine in Jackson?
Whatever it would take to train some people to operate the machine so I can come home. And then they could just operate the machine from there. So right now, if I could put a permanent machine in place in Jackson, Mississippi and walk away for probably $100,000.
Okay. All right. Now, I want to get
But
to
what
that.
I would do is I would leave that machine there, and then I'd raise more money to build them another machine, because this machine is the exact same kind of machine that went to Puerto Rico, went to Flint. It's along those same lines, but I've advanced the technology, so I would love to build them a brand new machine, but this interim machine would help them out considerably.
So how much does it cost you to build a machine?
How much does it cost for me to build? It just depends on what the price of materials are at a certain time. It depends on how the supply chain is. And I don't like quoting prices of equipment, because the prices of equipment can change, whether you want a generator, a self-contained generator on it, just a water generator by itself, water storage and treatment, whether you want it to come in a 20-foot ISO, 40-foot ISO, whether you want it at lightweight materials. So when I custom build machines.
Gotcha.
So whatever I do for the military, I custom build machines. Sometimes they tell me they want them heavier. Sometimes they tell me they want them lighter. And then the price, whatever price I quote you, is only good for 30 days, because the price of materials goes up and down constantly. Supply chain issues. So remember what happened during COVID? You remember you couldn't get parts for cars?
Right.
Well, it's starting to speed up again, but with the way prices are going and instability in the world, socially, climate instability, geopolitical instability, it changes the prices of durable goods and materials every 30 days.
Gotcha. And there's a method to my madness, and that'll come near the end of the program.
Okay.
What is the significance of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Action 49191?
We're talking about the sustainability goals, the 17 tenets of sustainability.
Yes, sir. What's the significance of you being designated one of those, your foundation?
Well, the significance is that out of the 17 tenets of sustainability, goal number 6 is water. And I went to the United Nations, and Bill Tingling and Paulo Mondesir, they got the United Nations to recognize this technology and the foundation as a source and potential source in the future that will be able to produce water. So even if you have no electricity, which I've done and supplied 15,000 people drinking water because I did it with solar power, we did that in Puerto Rico on the island of Yaquis. We ran with a Tesla battery and Tesla solar array, and we supplied the entire island and parts of mainland Puerto Rico with water, because they were charging anywhere from $5 to $10 a gallon, and we were giving it away free on donations. So the United Nations has recognized this. They understand. They understand the technology more than most Americans understand the technology, and they know that in the lifetime of the children that are not born, that are in the young children that are born today, this is going to be something that's going to be absolutely necessary for them in the future.
So this is something that recognizes the technology and legitimizes it for posterity. So when you go to be with your ancestors, somebody else will be able to use this technology because of this sanction.
Absolutely. But I have to reiterate this. I've been trying for 10 years to get this technology into the hands of civilians. And the only time it's ever gotten into the hands of a civilian is when I do some work through my foundation. But on the for-profit side of my house, this technology is in the military inventory. They use this technology daily, yearly, and they've been doing it ever since I've been building it for them. And I do not understand. I've given up on trying, actually. I'm moving into focusing strictly on designing equipment for the United States military and still doing humanitarian work, because the military, when they give me equipment and they want to buy new equipment, I take the old equipment, I rehab that equipment, and then I try to go do some humanitarian work with it.
All right. So you've been doing this for like 12 years. If you work another 12 years, what do you hope to have accomplished with this work?
Oh, what would I like? What would I like to accomplish? What I would like to accomplish, I would like to accomplish the elimination of the food desert within the city. I would like to have atmospheric water generators generating enough water to supply a small town. I would like to have them producing food that is organic, non-GMO, free of pesticides, herbicides, because part of the problem why so many Americans are have health issues is because of all the chemicals and all the salt and sugar that's in food. That's why we go into the inner city. People have weight issues, diabetes issues, heart trouble. All these problems that they have is because they're eating a diet of fast food, which is supplied to them because they don't have access to green foods. So what would I like to see happen? These automated systems that I know how to build that will grow food year round and produce water year round being right there in the city.
Okay.
I like to see every emergency service, every city along the coast that has a hurricane, you have to wait to have water shipped in. I would like to have they could have my machines, excuse me,
Bless you.
they could have, thank you. They could have my machines and all they have to do is pull these machines out. So every time there's a natural disaster, emergency, a hurricane, a flood, a fire, and people don't have water, if they would, this machine is just part of the natural lexicon of what they do every day in an emergency. Just pull them out, start them up, and have all the drinking water you need.
So now here was the method to my madness about asking all those questions about cost. What do you need? What kind of help do you need to continue this mission? So this is your chance now to plug the foundation and how people can donate and all that stuff.
Oh, you can donate through the Moses West Foundation. And right now, I don't, if you continuously donate, if I raise millions of dollars to my foundation, I would build hundreds of machines. And the hundreds of machines that I would build, I would take them to Flint. I would give one to the city of Flint. I would take one to Jacksonville, Florida, give it to a neighborhood in Jacksonville that's got contaminated water. Take one to Baltimore, Maryland, who they call me all the time. They have contaminated water. The kids in their neighborhood don't have anything to do. They can learn how to work the machine, learn how to grow food. That's what I would do. I would work on the machines that I currently have that need to go on missions. That's what I would do. I would, when you donate to the foundation, that allows me to get to work to do things for other people. If there's no donations to the foundation, everything just comes to a halt. The foundation can cover its bills in the way of keeping websites up, keeping the accountant working, small things like that. The overhead is very low. So with donations comes saving people's lives. In the Moses West Foundation, it's a website, it's up and running. There's a GoFundMe page right there on the website as well. And that's how we get a machine to Cami Kitchens. That's how I get a machine out to Maui, Hawaii. That's how I get a machine to Compton, to Baltimore, to any disenfranchised neighborhood in the United States that has a lead problem in their drinking water.
And give the folks the website again.
It is the MosesWestFoundation.org.
And just spell it all the way out, Moses West Foundation.
And Moses West Foundation, all one word, .org.
All right. Well, Brother West, I appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me, man. I look forward to seeing more great things from you. I hope that this helps in getting the word out to get some money for the foundation from you. I would think that, places where you have helped, people have been donating, but uh, the more people that know, the better. I don't want you
Absolutely.
I just don't want you sharing the technology with the military. I want you to continue to be a service to the community. And I thank you, brother, for what you've been able to do so far.
Well, thank you. Thank you. But remember this, the military, a lot of the funds that the military puts into the company, I take from the for-profit side and I put it into the nonprofit side. So the military is actually supporting the nonprofit side of the company. So I take that profit and I use that profit to help people.
And that as a good businessman, that's the way you're supposed to sell it. Thank you so much, brother.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Again, Brother West, thank you for coming on, and we'll catch y'all on the other side.
All right. Thank y'all. Thanks for having me on.
All right, and so we are back. MosesWestFoundation.org. MosesWestFoundation.org. Please donate to this organization. I know, some of y'all are into trying to make donations so that'll show up on your taxes and stuff. This is an organization that's worthy of doing that. When I just think about what was going on in Jackson, Mississippi, and for this brother to come in and do what he did, as much as the impact as other celebrities and other people, donating money for water to be distributed and all those National Guard folks who were mobilized and Mayor Lumumba and his leadership and guiding the city through, even Deion Sanders when he was coaching there and navigating through all that and helping out through the team. Moses West bringing that machine was a game changer. It was a game changer in the sense that, it's one thing to kind of see it on the national news like, oh man. But just like when he showed up in Flint and it was like this incredible ray of hope, is like, there was only so much bottled water and people were trying to figure out how they were going to bathe and all that stuff. And it's like, how are we going to bathe with bottled water? And then here this brother comes with this machine that basically generates water from the air. And then he showed up in Jackson. And that to me is something that every city needs to have that capacity. And I really would love for his dream to come true, right? That every community that's considered a food desert, if they're not going to build a grocery store in the area, at least have the capacity to create a garden and where folks can grow vegetables and fruit and all that stuff. And if you have that kind of technology, that AWG, the atmospheric water generator, that could help the irrigation process, I mean, that's a game changer. So y'all donate to that. Please go to the website, connect on that. There's a GoFundMe like right there on the homepage. Give something if you can, and support this brother, in doing God's work, right? Speaking about doing good work, let me introduce my next guest. Her name is Shael Norris. Shael Norris is the founding executive director of SafeBAE, the only U.S. national survivor-founded, youth-led organization working to prevent sexual violence among teens. She has dedicated her career to ending sexual violence and empowering youth activism. As a youth activist, she was a founding staffer of V-Day, overseeing all benefit productions of the Vagina monologues, and this was like from 1999 to 2016, and the creation of the Campus Accountability Project, calling for improved prevention and response on college campuses. It was this higher education prevention work that led her to co-creating SafeBAE in 2015 in partnership with Daisy and Charlie Coleman, Ella Farron, and Jada Smith. Her work will be published in the 2024 Journal of Child Sexual Abuse. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and a distinct privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Shael Norris. All right, Shael Norris, how you doing, sister? You doing good?
Fine. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. I think you have an organization that needs to be highlighted, and especially the work that you're doing. So I wanted to offer my podcast up to be able to highlight that. One of the things I do with guests is that I have a quote that I find either that relates to the work or something that person might have said or written in a book or whatever, and I want them to kind of expound on it. And in your case, it's not something that you said. It's something that Dr. King said, but I think is appropriate for what you do. And it says, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." What does that quote mean to you as far as your work?
I think as far as my work is concerned, that quote means everything, because everything about what I do is trying to bring conversations and practical reality around the taboos that are related to sexual violence, especially when we're talking about young people. So the silence is what is ultimately killing people and ultimately having really, really incredible consequences that are, even the consequences are taboo. So I think, silence begets shame, which begets so many horrible mental health outcomes. And everything about that is why we do this work in such an early stage intervention.
So tell the folks, what is SafeBAE and what is the mission of the organization?
So SafeBAE stands for Safe Before Anyone Else. And we are the only organization of our kind in the US. We focus exclusively on dating violence and sexual violence prevention among teenagers, middle school and high school students specifically. And we are survivor founded and youth led, which means that 2/3 of our board of directors is under the age of 25. And I mean board of directors. I don't mean advisory board. I don't mean tokenized in any way. I mean, I work for them. And so we are very unique in the way that we approach this work and have been really, I think, trying to disrupt and interrupt and change everything about the taboo and the way any kind of prevention work has been done before.
So how did you get involved with the organization?
I am one of the co-founders of the organization. I am the only adult co-founder of the organization. I founded the group with a group of sexual assault survivors, 3 girls who were all raped at the age of 14, and one of their older brothers who was very keen to be involved in the founding of the organization because it was his teammates and peers that had assaulted his sister. And they are all the subjects of a profoundly difficult movie to watch. It's a documentary on Netflix called Audrey and Daisy, and they were about 17 when we formed the organization.
Okay. So that leads to another question. So you were the adult in the room. How did you end up being the adult in the room?
Yeah. That's a much longer story. So I have been doing anti-violence work in one form or another for about 26 years. And I started really young, and I always say I was just kind of standing in the right place at the right time. I was working in theater in New York City. I was about 22, and I met the incredible and unstoppable Eve Ensler, who now goes by V. And she had written the Vagina Monologues, and it was debuting off Broadway. And I was standing in the right place in the right time, and joined the crew that was running the show off Broadway. And the formulation for the creation of the global nonprofit organization V-Day began at that time. And I got to be lucky enough to be one of the founding staff. And I oversaw all the benefit productions of the Vagina Monologues on college campuses for 18 years. And it was my profound pleasure and really my birthing into adulthood. And I was the baby of the organization at the time. And all of these brilliant, incredible, just like mind-blowing women gave me the opportunity to lead in that space and trusted me with that work. And all of a sudden one day, we've been doing that work, in an incredible pace for so long. And I woke up one day and I was 40, and things had really changed about college campuses at that time. There's still, don't get me wrong, a lot of work to be done there, but there had been this incredible tipping point on college campuses where campuses were no longer able to cover up sexual assault and not do prevention work and not do Title IX obligations. And so at that point, I really wanted to go down again to the front lines. I'm clearly insane. And I wanted to do work in middle schools and high schools. I was turning 40. I was no longer the baby of the organization, and my children were coming of age and entering middle school. And I think at that moment, it really hit me that I wanted to not only do this work at a younger age, but I wanted to be the person who gifted to younger people what was gifted to me, which was the opportunity to lead, the voice, the platform, and the resources as an adult ally that I've been able to, acquire over all these years, to help to, birth them into this incredible opportunity. They had the platform of the film. There was no question that was going to be, an incredible resource. And I've always connected art and activism with the work that I've done. So I thought, again, that we could, in that same vein, use the film to open up conversations, humanize the issue in a way that it really hadn't been before, but then build upon that, really build this giant library of resources created by young people for young people to break through everything, to stop, I think, preventing their access to knowledge, right? There's so much gatekeeping by adults in the access to knowledge that they critically need. So if we bypassed all adult authority, we brought in only adult allies that were going to help to foster this youth-led movement, then they really were going to be the people who were going to be able to do it. I'd never met such profoundly amazing young people, resilient and visionary young people. And I just really felt like I wanted to take what was given to me again and be that adult ally to them and help them build the organization. And I have to say, all of what they've built continues. We just keep building and pulling in more young people. And as I'd warned them, 8 years ago, they would age out of their own target demographic. So we would need to continuously bring more people into the work, young people coming up and coming of age who are also impacted by this work and were passionate about change.
That sounds pretty cool.
So,
I mean,
yeah,
that
that's
as
a long
far as
story.
well, I mean that mentoring piece, you know what I'm saying? It's like paying it forward, if you will. That's an awesome concept to have. Now I'm about to get into some grim statistics and stuff. According to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys have been sexually abused before the age of 18. Do you think there is an uptick in sexual assault, or are we just more aware of its existence?
I think it's both. I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. I do think that there have been changes culturally that have allowed people to feel safer in coming forward. But I also think there's been, a change in the exposure through the internet, through all kinds of other resources that, again, in my opinion, only, I think is increasing, the statistics of how often this kind of thing occurs. But I also think it's just a lack of awareness was there before too, right? Again, it was so taboo that I don't think we were prepared to have conversations about what was really happening among kids ever before. And I still don't think the vast majority of people are comfortable having any conversation about this. It's really scary and difficult to think about or talk about.
Well, let me ask this question, and then I'll dovetail back. According to the same resource, 12% of African American girls are more likely to experience sexual violence as compared to 9.9% of white girls.
Yeah.
Why do you think that discrepancy is in those two communities?
Oh my gosh, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think there's, again, a taboo. I think that there has been, so much research to support the sexualizing of young girls of color at young ages, right? We sexualize young girls, whether they develop faster or, different culturalization that puts those numbers up. I also think there's a significant amount of secrecy and shame around secrecy around the amount of grooming and the amount of like older people that are really having creating those statistics. It's a number of things. I think anytime you're talking about a marginalized community, you're talking about risk factors, including socioeconomic risk factors. Sometimes it's even a matter of education or lack of access to prevention resources, knowledge about what's, even something as simple as knowing what consent is at a young age. If anyone's not taught that, then they're not going to be able to advocate for if something's happening. And that goes for if it's an adult to child perpetrator or a peer-to-peer perpetrator in those younger years.
So to kind of back up what you're saying, right? So I did abstinence education for a couple of years. And, we would go into the schools and all that. And so I remember our first day, we were going to talk to the principal about what we were going to present for abstinence education. And the very first student I saw, me and the team, was a pregnant girl. She couldn't have been no more than 12, walking down the hallway. And I kind of joked to the team, "Oh, I guess we're too late for this school." You know what I'm saying? Because it was like, what's going on with this, And so the principal kind of told the story that this guy who wasn't related to her was like in his 30s and, had convinced her to engage with him. And, so when you use the term grooming, that's what brought that story to mind. Kind of define, you use the term sexualize. Kind of expand on that. What does that mean? What exactly defines sexualizing somebody?
Well, I think when you're talking about a young girl who's just starting to develop, or a young person of any gender identity, if they're just starting to develop, right, and they're physically not looking like a child as much anymore, but they are very much still a child, then that sexualization means that there is an adult or even a peer that is looking at that person who is still very much a child, who may not look as much like a child anymore, and they are sexualizing them in a way that's engaging them as if they're an older person. And so when we have a situation like that, and we are expecting young people who may be more, developed to act and engage with older people as if they are older people, that sexualization is an incredibly, incredibly pervasive piece of our culture. And I think that expands through all ages. But I think, again, when you're talking about abstinence-only education, It's the biggest failure of our country. Abstinence education does not work. It has been proven time and time and time again. The only reason it exists is because there are adults who want to gatekeep access to information to children because they think it's going to protect children. And I understand that. Who doesn't want to protect children? But if you're going to actually protect children based on facts, based on data, based on what we know has worked and hasn't worked, then we would eliminate abstinence-only education and we would concentrate wholeheartedly on consent education and healthy relationship education, because what that's going to do is help kids of any, like, again, in any community, regardless of whether or not that that school or that community might be conservative, might be religious based. You can teach consent education in a completely religious context, in a conservative context, because at the foundation of consent is bodily autonomy. The foundation of consent is refusal skills. If you can't say, this is my body, I decide what happens with my body, no one's going to pressure me or make me feel like I should do something that I don't want to do for any reason, whether because they want it, because they feel like I owe it to them, then I'm going to be able to advocate for that and stop someone from taking something from me, whether, again, it is an older person or someone that's of the same age. The more we concentrate on helping kids identify their comfort levels and what consent is, because again, I think there is a lot of misunderstanding around what consent is. People don't see coercion and pressure and guilting people into whatever it may be, whatever level of intimacy, as a violation of consent, as sexual assault, which it is. If you're using coercion, pressure, guilt, any of those things, you are not practicing consent. And so therefore, any intimacy that happens after you've guilted someone into it or pressured them into it, that is non-consensual and that is sexual assault. But we don't teach that. If we taught that, even if we only taught that, then kids would understand how to have those boundaries and how to advocate for themselves and how to access help if somebody was pressuring them or guilting them.
Yeah, I see you kind of shut down 2 years of work that I did. But seriously
I'm
though,
so sorry.
no. But I agree with you. Having been there, I think the reality is that in dealing with those young people during that time, it was very apparent that you need to have something more comprehensive. And I like the phrase consent education. Because you're trying to empower young people. You could tell that you were in some of the situations that I spoke at. It was a big guilt thing going on, and then I would have to kind of talk to that student on the side, and say, no, we're not saying that, but we are laying out factors that, how tough it'll be compared to not being pregnant to being pregnant. Trying to, from high school on up, right? So, but I'm
It's not the worst thing either. Pregnant of all, and I'm not saying it's not, a dire consequence for a young person, but to be very clear, statistically speaking, young people, and this is a very, very specific to young people who experience sexual violence trauma, they have the highest rate of suicidal ideation of any age group who experience sexual trauma. So pregnancy is a dire consequence, but I will tell you the most critical consequence. And again, the CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Survey report this year finally connected sexual violence and suicidal ideation among teenage girls across this country. They are at the critically highest rates they've ever seen since they started collecting this data. So we're talking about keeping people alive. We're not just talking about keeping people not pregnant. We are talking about keeping them alive, keeping them in school. So many girls who experience sexual violence drop out of school. So many girls take their lives, and this is what I call like the slow suicide. They absolutely, because of that trauma, steer into very abusive relationships, very risk-taking behavior, drug use, alcohol use, trafficking. They are very, very, I think, at risk for trafficking and risk behaviors like that, because they have experienced an untreated trauma that has led everything in that direction, especially and not without exception, their own, taking their own lives.
Right.
So there's so many reasons to interrupt that work. And I think the other thing about, unfortunately, a lot of the abstinence only education that's been out there, it's so interesting. One of the people that I think spoke most brilliantly about this is Elizabeth Smart. Do you remember her? She was a kidnapped victim, Mormon little girl, very little when she was kidnapped. One of the things that she talked about was experiencing that abstinence only education in a way that made her blame herself for the assault itself, as well as think that since that assault, which again, she had absolutely no decision-making and autonomy in the involvement of it, right? But it made her feel as though she was used and discarded and could never be of any value or find intimacy, consensual intimacy with anyone ever again. So that's another reason that we don't want to put kids in that educational track where if anything does happen that they don't have say over, that they then blame themselves, they then feel that they have no worth after. All of those are really dangerous places to position kids.
So why do you think that there is a credibility issue when a teenager claims to be sexually assaulted?
Well, I think there's a couple reasons. First of all, there's a credibility issue when many people, kids or not kids, report sexual violence. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's some very brilliant research studies that explain a bit about that. And I think, it's culturalization. It's wanting to not believe that could happen, because so many of we're culturalized mostly through media to think that the only kind of real assault, real rape, is a stranger who jumps out of the woods, hits you over the head, it's very violent, you don't know them, when the vast majority of rapes and sexual assault happen by somebody we know. And when somebody reports something that happens to them that I think everyone in the culture would agree is egregious, horrible, one of the worst crimes you can commit, the level of disbelief that someone could do that, we're so trained in our minds to think that only a monster, only a complete and total, stranger and monster who, isn't among us could do that. So we're inclined to disbelieve that person. But especially when you talk about young people in a peer-to-peer capacity, it's not so much disbelief as normalization of it, right? If somebody, if a young person comes to an adult and says, this peer of mine raped or sexually assaulted me, the inclination is to say, well, that, how many times have we heard boys will be boys? They didn't mean it. They just really like you. They, why were you wearing that? That made them think they could do that to you. There's so many reasons to disbelieve. And that's why we have to do such early intervention work that negates all of that, stops that cultural normalcy before they're ever in intimate relationships, before they're ever down that road. We can stop that normalization and dispel all of those myths and do that prevention work early enough will present us with the opportunity to interrupt an entire lifetime of violence, domestic violence, workplace harassment. If we teach children at a young enough age in that developmental window what that's all supposed to look like, what bodily autonomy is supposed to look like, what intimacy is supposed to look like in a consensual way, then we're interrupting those norms, and also giving them tools to intervene if they see somebody who's saying unhealthy things, practicing unhealthy behavior, trying to get people to drink so that they can have intimacy with them, that other young people can interrupt those types of things will also work to that prevention.
Yeah, and one of the most famous people that fall into that category when I was thinking about that question was Oprah Winfrey, and remembering her tell her story, and how painful it was for her that somebody that she respected assaulted her, and then people that she loved and respected didn't believe her when she told it. And she had to carry that for years and years. And fortunately, she had a platform where she could talk about it, but not everybody has that platform. Not everybody's going to be given that opportunity. So that's why I wanted to highlight you, because you're one of those organizations that's allowing that to happen for young people. Speaking about that, That's also a segue to this next question. And well, it's not really a question, it's a request for you to talk about the SafeBAE 360 Schools program.
Sure. Yeah, so that's where we have really, I have to say, we've been very busy in the last 8 years. We started with just youth engagement, right? Like giving everything away to kids for free. This is how you can start a school club. This is how you can access this information. We have trained over 1,200 students as certified peer educators in sexual violence prevention across the US in 45 states.
Wow.
And we did it all with no marketing budget, with really absolutely just kind of put it out in the world, but it was free. And we just kind of put it on social media. We kind of let the kids talk among themselves. So that tells you what a desperate need there is, right? But what we found as we developed those things, right? We were engaging all these kids. We have an unprecedented social media following because the kids will not give me the login. They are so good at it. They know how to reach that audience, and we'd done it. But what we started to see was that if we weren't engaging the adults around those kids, whether it's educators, parents, all of those allies around them, that when they wanted to talk about that with the adults, they wanted to, or they reported something or things like that, that they were actually kind of being re-victimized because much like you said with Oprah, if kids come forward and even if they know their rights and even if they know in their hearts and from our education resources that what happened to them was wrong, but if the adults around them won't intervene and help to keep them safe and help them access their rights in schools, then we're continuing to fail them, even if we're succeeding at reaching kids. So we developed a 360 school program so that we could really shift the way prevention work is done in schools, engage every single stakeholder in the building. Historically, what we've seen in any kind of early intervention work is that it's one lesson, maybe a couple lessons, very short, on very minimal surface level healthy relationships. Sometimes it's an assembly, but mostly it's like a sophomore health class, maybe a couple of lessons. And that again, there's a lot of data to support that it doesn't work. It doesn't change cultural understanding. It doesn't shift the norms among kids. That we needed to engage kids in a way that they really felt that they had the opportunity to change their own culture, hold their own peers accountable, and really shift things. So there has to be that critical buy-in from kids. But then when you look at the rest of the stakeholders in a school environment in particular, we have to do work with adults. And I say all the time, I'm probably about the same age as your moms, and we got nothing. We got no healthy relationship. That was a bad date. Do not talk about it again. And we had every form of toxic media out there. I love to talk to parents and really ruin all of our favorite films from the 80s and really really unpack that stuff so we can better understand why some of these things were normalized for us. And, I say anything. Do you remember that film with John Cusack? God bless, love John Cusack, loved that movie. But if you look back at that now, it didn't age well. He was technically stalking the girl in the end. Right. There's a lot of representation out there. And so we have to engage all those adults who, whether they're parents or educators, in understanding why they don't quite have a solid foundation for when a kid comes forward now. So really engaging parents, and then also providing schools with foundational information about how to be compliant in Title IX. So Title IX is a federal law. It applies to all public education, K through 12, higher ed. It even applies to a lot of private education because many of them take federal funds. Anytime you take federal funds, Title IX applies. It's been around for decades, but it has not been enforced. And during the Obama era White House, they did amazing work to create a letter called the Dear Colleague letter that really outlined the expectations of safety, particularly when Title IX covers a lot of things. But specifically when we're talking about safety and equal access to education because of things like sexual violence or gender identity. The Obama era White House delivered a letter called the Dear Colleague letter, but they only delivered it to higher ed. But what they did was outline, this is our expectation, this is the law, this is how long, how you're supposed to implement it, and this is how long you have to get up to code on college campuses. And it changed everything about what was happening on college campuses. Again, there's still a lot of work to do there, but it set in motion the right direction. But what it did was leave out K through 12. And so when we look at the early intervention that needs to get done, the first people who will tell you that it is critically important for it to happen before college is people on college campuses. They say all the time, like, we cannot undo all of that, like, cultural education of students in like a freshman orientation. Like, we're not wizards over here. All of that work needs to be done, especially when you look at, I don't know if you're familiar with the term called the red zone.
No.
It is the first 3 months of every college, every school year, particularly on college campuses. Ours is statistically the highest likelihood of sexual violence over the lifetime of any particularly female identified student. The highest risk of sexual violence is in that 3-month window. Oftentimes it's because you're in a new place, you do not have parent oversight, and maybe you're doing things you wouldn't do if your parents were there to police that. And you're not necessarily around your friends who could, buddy system with you. But what happens in that first 3 months of school every year is the highest rates of sexual violence reporting on college campuses. So these campuses are deeply overwhelmed. So the only way to prevent that 3-month window is to do that work so much earlier. Make sure before they ever set foot on college campuses and ever leave your home. And that's for the kids who get to go to college, right? There's plenty that don't get to go to college. So there's so many reasons to do it earlier, and to make sure that high schools, middle schools, K through 12 across the board understands what their obligations are under Title IX, that we do comprehensive training for Title IX directors, principals, superintendents, assistant principals, because right now, almost no people in those roles in secondary education have ever been trained how to do an investigation, which means that when they're going to try and do an investigation, they are going to deeply traumatize that student. They're probably going to traumatize themselves, and they're probably going to put their school at deep liability, at risk for litigation, because they, like, that student and their family may have a very strong case against that school, which we see all the time. There's thousands of Title IX cases against schools. So we want to make sure that on the flip side of engaging all those students, we're also making sure that we're helping those schools to respond to those students. How can we make sure the school is prepared to help that student access healing, have a proper Title IX investigation? And then the last piece that we brought, and it was entirely at the demand of young people, was something that we call an accountability training. And that means when you have an investigation, and this is secondary education, but it's also certainly available and applicable in higher ed. Right now, when you have a perpetrator or you have an investigation that's open, there are no tools to deal with that respondent. It is either suspension or expulsion. And what we know is that that does not reduce the likelihood that they're going to do it again. And if you ask every survivor on the face of the planet, they will say, I want my perpetrator to never do that to another person. So if we're going to try and address that, specifically among young people, we have to provide a training for people who have been accused of sexual violence to help them understand what happened, help them reflect on how they could have done better, what they thought was consent, because they all think they're masters of consent, and what wasn't, so that they can reduce that likelihood. And we've seen the accountability training that we provide used in so many different settings. We've seen it used in court settings with respondents in court settings, but also higher ed and secondary. And it's a critical piece of the tools that have never existed before to make sure that we're dealing with the entire spectrum, right? We have to deal with parents, we have to deal with students, and we have to deal with respondents. We cannot be out here punishing kids for violating consent when we've never taught them about consent in the first place. We need to make sure we interrupt that so they don't become repeated perpetrators. So that is, I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but the vast breadth of everything that we do under 360, and I am really, really thrilled to report that everything we've done with all the partner schools and pilots we've done so far has unprecedented data in really changing the beliefs and understanding of young people about sexual violence, about how to get help, about to advocate for their own bodily autonomy and consent and boundaries in relationships. I'm blown away how, I mean, obviously it's what we set out to do, but I've really been blown away by knowing that it's really working.
Well, that's pretty intense, and I mean, but in a good way,
Yeah.
Which leads me to ask this final question: what more can be done in the public policy arena to address this issue?
That is such a critical piece of it. The public policy piece, even in states, what we know, like there are about a dozen states that have passed legislation mandating consent education across the state. But I can tell you what doesn't come with that mandate is guidance and where to find authentic and evidence-based and really functional, like working tools for schools to do that. So what they tend to do is check the box that they're doing it when they're not doing it. And so there's no regulator, right, that's making sure that even if there is a mandate that it's happening. And there's also no funding. Like, thank you for the bill, but how are we getting that done? And so what we see a lot of times is that it just doesn't get done because there's not funding, there's not priority, there's not guidance, and there's not oversight. So we need much more, I think, in-depth legislation that helps to support all of this. I think we need so much more funding out of the Office of Violence Against Women. We need the Office of Violence Against Women to have a much less antiquated approach to doing this work. And there just needs to be billions and billions more dollars spent, because all the dollars spent in prevention will save a myriad of healthcare costs and all of the things that happen on the response side of things.
So I assume that y'all are a nonprofit, that y'all need money. How do people get in touch with you to get involved with the work, give donations? How can they learn? So maybe, your folks can come to their school. I mean, that's a pretty good saturation. You've hit 45 states, but that's not 50. So I know you're going to need funds to do it. How do people get in touch with the organization? Kind of let people know, like the websites, all that stuff. Are y'all on all the social medias,
We are. Yes. So safebae.org, and obviously /donate if people want to support. And I can't say enough, there is almost no funding for the work that we do. We exist on a we operate at under a $300,000 operating budget.
Wow.
I do not take a salary. And the vast majority of our team are young people who are, working as best they can. And a lot of it is at a reduced rate. So that is a critical need. I cannot say enough. There is just no money out there for the specific niche that we have. A lot of our funding comes from mental health grants, because we are doing suicide prevention work ultimately. So, and in terms of social media, our biggest engagement is on is on Instagram, and we're just safe_BAE. And we also have an incredible following on TikTok. And and you will not believe this if anyone had ever asked me. Our following on TikTok is specifically focused around, we launched a consent-themed clothing company. And I know it sounds nuts, but it's the totally idea of the kids. And when I tell you the level of engagement, it is predominantly underwear. So that is like bras with like the band that have consent messages, boxer shorts with the band at the top that say consent messages. And it has been so wildly successful on TikTok. And 100%, not 10%, not 5%, 100% of the proceeds of that goes toward all of our programs being free to young people. So that TikTok handle is askfirst.shop, but it is with 2 S's. So it's a little cheeky, ask first. But so again, I always say like that, if that's what it takes to engage kids and stop that scrolling and get them to find out about our programming, then I'll take it. But yeah, so that's kind of all the ways to find out about us. And we have reached kids in 45 states with our peer educator training, but we do not have partner schools in 45 states by any stretch of the imagination. We need adult allies more than anything else. Kids, we are reaching your kids on every platform they sit on, but we need adults. We need so many adults to really uphold the need for this work, whether it's, funding or pressuring their schools to really prioritize sexual violence prevention programming.
Well, Ms. Norris, I am glad that you accepted an invitation to come on. I'm glad that we were able to give you this platform, and hopefully it'll help in getting more, because you've been out here now, it seems like, for a long time. And like I said, the first time I heard about it, you literally was like within this month.
Yeah.
And I'm in Georgia now, but I was in Mississippi for a long time and grew up in Chicago. So, I hope that you're successful in doing this because it's vital for our children to be protected. And so I appreciate the work that you're doing, and good luck on everything.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your help in reaching your audience. Thank you again so much.
Yes, ma'am. All right, guys, we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right, guys, I'm back just to let you know that I was really, really honored to have the guests that I had come on this podcast. And I just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Be safe in your travels. Don't overeat. Enjoy your family. Make sure you let your loved ones know that they are loved. Tell them that. And until next time.